and I hadn't switched off my microphone yet. So this is Pam Henley, one of the consultants, and I'm based in Bozeman.
Thanks, Pam. And I'm Tracy, and I am the chair of the NAC and the director of library development. I think you're next, Cody. Oh, we lost him.
We can't hear Cody.
Oh.
Oh, he was muted.
Okay,
There
you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I am Cody Allen. I'm the teen librarian at Billings Public Library, here as a representative of the MSC. And I am working on my Surface Pro in my office because my work computer apparently hates everything that we're doing. So we'll see how this...
It was protesting against all the intellectual work, right?
I guess so. I mean, it's not uncommon.
I'll show you what's next, Elizabeth.
Oh, hi, this is Elizabeth Jonkel. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I'm the assistant director at Missoula Public Library. I sit on the NAC as the representative of the Montana Library Association.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Do you have a, oh. So Eva mentioned she doesn't know the order. You were actually next on the list, Eva, and it sounds like you don't have a mic. So Eva is the director of the Ani Nakota College Library, and she represents tribal college libraries. And it looks like Hannah had to log out and log back in, but Hannah, if you're with us, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Sorry, things froze. I'm Hannah McKelvey. I am the Electronic Resources Librarian at MSC Bozeman, and I am speaking today for Dorland Ross.
Thank you, Hannah.
I'm Jennifer Burnell. I'm the director of the Montana Memory Project at the State Library.
Hello, this is Pamela. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yay! Okay. I represent Trails.
All right. Thank you. Sonia, do you have a microphone? Okay. So Sonia is the director of the Miles City Public Library, and she represents the Library Federations. Go ahead, Stacy. If you're talking, we can't hear you, Stacy. I don't know if there's a mute button on your mic. I know I sometimes accidentally hit my mute button when I'm attending remotely. You can also use chat, too. So Suzanne, do you want to go ahead while Stacy might be typing, and that always takes longer. Would you like to introduce yourself? And Suzanne is one of our statewide consulting librarians. Stacy is the director of the Fallon County Library in Baker, Montana, and she represents small public libraries. Oh, okay. Thank you, Stacy. So we'll go ahead and go around the room.
I'm Jody Smiley, and I represent the medium-sized library, and I'm from the Boulder Community Library.
And I'm Kate Peterson. I represent the large high school libraries, and I'm here in Helena at Helena High.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLean. I'm here for special libraries, and I work at the State Library here in Helena, just across the hall.
I'm Susie McIntyre, and I am, as of 2 days ago, the director of the Great Falls Public Library, but I've worked there for a long time, and I am an at-large staff member.
My name is Amelia Kim, and I am the lifelong learning librarian at the Montana State Library.
My name is Kara Orban, and I also work at the Montana State Library.
And Coley Bartow with the Office of Public Instruction.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So our first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I have the August minutes there for your reference, but it's the November 13th minutes that I need some action on. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Stacy, we can't hear you for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm finally here.
Excellent.
It was the button on my little deal, so I moved it, and so now I'll mute myself.
All right, awesome. So,
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
thanks. Susie, can I have a second?
I'll second. It's Jody.
Any further discussion? So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And anyone who opposes, please say nay or type nay in the chat. And are there any abstentions? All right, motion carries. Thank you. So as many of you know, there's a legislative session going on, and so Jenny could not join us today. So I'm giving the kind of the state library and library development update. It's kind of a long laundry list. If I'm missing anything, let me know if there's something that I forgot that you're curious about. Or if you have any questions, jump in as we talk. So I'll go ahead and start with the legislative session. Crossing my fingers, it's been a fairly peaceful one. The State Library's budget is working its way through the system. The governor's budget had restored some of the funding that we lost in 2017, and that's where we stand right now. So if it goes through the session as is, we will at least be able to fill some of the positions we lost, which would make a huge difference for us. The legislature has been pretty supportive. We know we have some advocates out there who would actually like to see us just restored to the budget we had when we went into the 2017 session, but we have still a long ways to go. There has not been much legislation regarding libraries, specifically for our public library friends. The state aid per capita, it still stands that will come back to you starting July 1 of 2020. There's been no efforts to bring that alive, no efforts to change that, and there really haven't been very many bills at all related to libraries. There have been some privacy bills, and I'll just say the Government Affairs Committee of the Montana Library Association has been really active this year. They've been really trying to stay on top of the bills and give Nanette Gilbertson, the lobbyist for MLA, just some advice. And so she's testified on a couple of privacy bills. There's a couple of legislators who've brought forth this idea of protecting privacy. And so we've been supportive of them just for the value of protecting privacy and also to build champions in the legislature. There's a possible net neutrality bill that actually advocates for net neutrality. That has not come up yet, but because of the resolution of MLA, Nanette will testify in favor of that unless something strange happens. There was a service animal bill, and Nanette did testify in favor of that. It was actually about kind of trying to clarify that law and address people who do not have legitimate service animals who are coming in and taking advantage of that particular policy. So she also testified as a proponent of that. If you are interested, I know Pamela Benjamin is on the Government Affairs Committee, this as well. But if you are interested in that group, if you kind of find this whole legislative stuff of interest, then you would be welcome to join that group. Like I said, it's a good group. The Public Awareness Campaign, this is the Information Powers Growth. I brought some of these little stickers. If you don't have any and you'd like some, feel free to help yourselves. That campaign has wrapped up. We got a report from Bannock, the firm that was leading the efforts with the campaign, and Jenny and I are kind of going through it. It has some good suggestions for follow-up. So you'll probably hear more. Those materials are still available, and they're on MLA's website, and you are welcome to use them. The trust fund is a real and legal entity.
Wow.
I know. It's official. It has a board. It has its paperwork filed with the Montana Secretary of State. We've submitted the paperwork for the IRS for the 501c3. So it is a real thing. They are working on getting some funding for capacity building, so to hire at least maybe a part-time staff member to do some fundraising. That group will be meeting on April 9th, right before MLA here in Helena. So if you are interested, you would be welcome to attend their meeting. During the last Network Advisory Council meeting, Jenny brought up this idea of a cash management policy. And just as a reminder, because I know you get a lot of information thrown at you, in 2017, the legislature changed the way the coal severance tax funds worked. Prior to that, we shared that account with other agencies, other state agencies, and so we never had to worry about cash flow. The money was always there for us to pay our bills. And we use coal tax funds for the library federations, to pay part of our OCLC bill, part of the Montana Shared Catalog Cersei Dynex bill, and a variety of other things as well. And so that first session in 2017, that was pretty stressful because we had our own account, which was great. We weren't splitting it with the agencies, but it had no cash. And so we couldn't pay our bills. So we have managed to kind of figure out a flow, and hopefully we have the cash flow kind of worked out. But Jenny would like to make an official policy to just know how to handle that. So Melissa Williams, our accounting manager, is working with a couple of commission members on creating that policy. And so we'll share it with you when they have the first draft done. The Gigabit Toolkit work, as you know, one of the goals that you set was every Montanan has access to the internet. And Internet 2, which is kind of an initiative I believe out of the Institute of Museum and Library Services is where it started, is about helping libraries increase their broadband speed and have the best equipment, software and hardware, for running the internet and networking and just all the services we provide that need technology. We wanted to use some of the coal tax monies we had this year to hire a contractor to work with every single public library and all of their branches to complete this toolkit. It's pretty lengthy. At the end of this, you will, those libraries will have a really good idea of what equipment needs to be replaced, of where their broadband speed is in relation to national standards. And then that contractor is going to give us the statewide information, so we'll get all of the reports. And the goal is, Suzanne and Jenny probably are taking the lead on this, is to just work with libraries directly to try and help them increase their broadband speeds up to national standards. So that's kind of the effort that's going on there. The goal is to get that done by June 30th. It is in the process of vendors bidding on this Gigabit Toolkit.
So Tracy, I have
Yeah.
a question about that.
Absolutely.
Oddly enough, I was on a call with the U.S. Department of Education about broadband access. And one of the things that I had mentioned as a real success in our past was the partnership with public libraries in particular, but referencing back to the Broadband Technology Opportunities Grant from I was shocked to remember how many years ago that really was. So is there an opportunity to kind of do comparisons of where we ended with BTOP and then going back out to those same libraries and
seeing how we made progress?
Yeah, have we made progress beyond where those ending outcomes were? And it's great that all the BTOP reports and materials are archived on the state library website. But I think, for those who really remember that BTOP grant and the advantages that we all got from that, that might be a good way to introduce people to a new initiative basically around broadband access.
Yes. In fact, I was kind of comparing this toolkit to BTOP, which is what we called it, but then I thought, that was so many years ago, there's probably a lot of directors who wouldn't know what that was. So Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, because I did all of those assessments of network updates and E-rate filing and all of those things. So, I know Suzanne remembers those things very well.
Yes, indeed. Yep, good point, Suzanne and Jennifer. That was actually how we got Jennifer Burnell.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I know, I think in our dreams, Jenny and I would love to see this gigabit toolkit work turn into another mini BTOP where we could help libraries refresh their hardware as well as their broadband speeds. That would be lovely. The next thing on my list is increased federation funding. Jenny and I asked to give federations one time only an additional $40,000 of the leftover coal severance tax. It doesn't mean very much money for individual libraries, just anywhere from $400 to $700 depending on the size of the federation. But we wanted to just give them a little extra, especially with the loss of state aid. And so the commission approved that. What I'm really happy about is the commission approved actually increasing the overall amount going to federations from here on. Federations were getting $176,000. That's divided up amongst the 6. Honestly, I went back 10 years and that was the dollar amount. So I think it's probably been that amount longer than that. And they agreed to increase it to $225,000 divided up amongst the 6. So they basically put in another $50,000. So that was really nice to see that increase going to federations, and that's moving forward, going into the future. And the last thing I'm going to bring up here is more just I wanted to share with you some work that we've been doing in library development that's based on I've been asking you over time, which goals should we focus on, where should we put our efforts, and you told us. And so what we try to do in library development is basically create measurable objectives. Like we could say, this is what we did related to that goal. And I'm just going to share that with you right now. This is an actual living document. And I'll just check for those of you who are online. I know sometimes the print can be kind of tiny. Do you need me to zoom into this, or does it look okay from your end? Okay, great. Thank you. So we're trying to be somewhat realistic. I have a feeling we're probably our usual, oh yeah, we can do all of those things. This is what we sort of hope to work on and achieve in the next year. And so we're still hashing out some of these to try and make them much more concrete. I mean, some of them I think are pretty concrete. Like we want 75% of the public libraries to include early literacy skill building in their story times and summer reading program. And you can see under here, by the way, these are projects that are related to implementing that success measure. Some of them, though, we freely admit, Kara and I have been going back and forth to try and figure out how to make this one measurable, seeing value in collaboration. So, I know some of you are just geniuses at this stuff, so if you have any suggestions, I'd love to hear what you have to say. But these are all kind of related to the goals that you said we want you to focus on. And in the case of Amelia with lifelong learning, the specific subject areas that you said you wanted her to focus on as well. And so I just really wanted to share this with you because you'll, I hope, see it again as we try to get better about measuring how we're doing in achieving these. And just so you could see, and I guess give me a chance to say, that's not success for us. When we said we want you to, for instance, focus on mind mimicking, we didn't really mean that libraries would use it. I have a feeling that's not what you would say, but if we missed anything in this, do let us know as we go through it.
Do you want to change that success measure to something, the one that you were talking about, to libraries and board members demonstrate that they see the value in collaboration and shared information infrastructure by belonging to at least one share,
Oh, that's a good suggestion.
That they demonstrate that they value it
By
by belonging to
a collaborative effort. What do
at
you
least
think?
one collaborative effort.
I'm looking at Kara. What do you think?
Or that's getting a lot closer to measurable.
Yes, it is. I agree.
You can't-
Yeah.
And we show we value stuff by our behavior, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. We see the value, but we're not part of that group. Yeah, it doesn't really.
Can you give examples of the collaborative efforts that you'd be a part of? Like
Like,
share
yeah,
catalog
Or
or-
Montana
yeah.
Library
I mean,
to
I know
Go,
the obvious ones, but.
or Montana Memory Project, or the Courier Project, or
Does it have to be a statewide thing though? Because like Carly and I, we go in together to get EBSCO databases.
yeah, that would be
So
one.
That would be one,
That would be
or
one.
like Canopy.
Yeah.
Because we can't afford it just
Absolutely.
as
Mm-hmm.
I
two
think-
separate, but together we can.
And we'd like to know about those kind of grassroots
Yes.
collaborative efforts, because I think that's wonderful too. And can be an example of.
Because there are some people, they kind of like, our high school, they no longer have. And I had been working with the librarian in the past to try and get her onto the show catalog, but then they got shut down. So I can see that some libraries are going to say, we can't afford the expense of like the share catalog or the Montana Library to Go, but I think even if you're doing, like, we did work with the schools were part of the EBSCO databases. It was us, Carly, Boulder, and the high school that all worked together to get, because the high school wanted master file complete. And Carly and I are like, you're out of your mind, that is not in our budget. And they're like, well, what if we put in the kitty? And we made it work. So I think if we let people know that it doesn't have to be just, it's better if we're all on the shared catalog, in my opinion, but if we're not, at least show them that we're trying in different ways.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Does anyone from online have anything you'd like to add to the discussion? Oh, in the chat box.
Can you pull out the chat from the tools and make it bigger? Because I'm.
Hi, Trace. This is Elizabeth in Missoula. One thing, a place where you can see different collaborations demonstrated frequently is at the annual MLA conference. So that's a good place to patrol, to identify maybe some collaborative efforts that were maybe being done at an individual basis, but still had a long-term statewide impact because they appeared at the conference.
That's a good point, Elizabeth. And actually, I should add federation meetings to that as well. That's another place where people tend to talk about collaborative efforts that are happening regionally that may, in fact, scale up statewide effort. Anything else? I'll give you actually a few more moments to kind of read through this. I should have actually just threw it into a Word document to share it with you so you could see it instead of using the dynamic version.
Tracy, are we allowed, is this document a living, breathing thing that we can add to over time? Because I'm just thinking about Zoho and how that's going to give us some real measurable success measures,
Yes.
but it's not yet represented in this document.
No, it's not. And I think that's partially because I see it as a tool to achieve these success measures. So it's like the data we can collect to see whether or not we're working towards these success measures. But yeah, it is a living document. That's actually what I like about it. mean, the goals are what we're shooting for, but we needed to just have something that we're like, okay, we know we're making progress here. And that's what this document's about.
Okay.
Okay. That was all I had for the state library update. Did I miss anything? Is there anything that you heard about that you're like, what about this, Tracy? Or any questions you have? Or anything you would like to report? Something you've been working on that you think might be of interest statewide? Or like, no? Would you like to demonstrate the value of collaborative efforts? Go ahead, Sarah.
By the end of the month, so the law library and the self-help centers, so more legal resources for your patrons. We're working on adding short videos to our forms page, so people who are representing themselves. We created a couple, and they'll be posted. We have a YouTube channel, and then they'll be posted on the forms page. So they're just, we're calling them bite size, so people with non-legal backgrounds can have not just the forms, but then a little video that with some basic concepts. So we've done completed one video that are best practices for filing. Yours truly is the star because I was just super cheesy excited about it, so I ended up being it. And then by the end of the month, we'll have one overview on free, low-cost, or other legal resources. So people go, I need a lawyer, where do I start? They can watch that. And then a third on service. So when people are filing, they have to serve the other party. We talk about what that means. So I think we've got a great little team, and we'll be doing some more during the summer and hoping that it's something really useful for people.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay. So I don't know if this is the right place to do this, but I'm wondering if, does everybody know about the Emilio Estevez movie that's coming out?
No.
Well, sorry. It's called Public, and it's a dramatization of the problem of homelessness in public libraries. So obviously all I've seen is the trailer because it's not out yet. But we at Great Falls Public are very concerned both that we serve our homeless population and that we deal with the problem of kind of the scared American situation. Because we know that there are people that don't come to the library because they're afraid. We had actually a whole social media drama about that in Great Falls. But so we are concerned about this movie exacerbating people's fear of public library as a scary place, but we're also excited about some higher visibility for libraries. And so I don't know if there could be like some statewide help around messaging, or how do we talk to people about visit. I mean, I know that a lot of the big libraries do a lot of stuff around homelessness. It's just, I haven't seen the whole movie, so I'm not exactly sure how it shows, but I think this is both an opportunity and a threat for us to respond to in terms of public life. We're going to try to put together some programming with our rescue mission, which is our homeless shelter, and the chief of police, and maybe our mental health center around responding to the movie. But I just, it makes sense to me that all the public libraries could kind of have a unified response. Where did you see the trailer?
Yeah.
It's on
YouTube. Yeah, it's coming out, I think, mid-April.
And does that actually get a wide release?
It's coming out in mid-April. Oh, okay. So the trailer got released, and so that's how it got forwarded to me, and then I was like, oh my goodness, we're gonna have to.
This is Elizabeth speaking. I did get to see the film at ALA last summer, And it's a very uplifting and comical movie. It's thought-provoking. It's challenging, but in a really positive way. I agree that it as a discussion piece is a really rich opportunity for all the communities across the United States. And I know that I'm going to start talking with some of our local homeless advocates here in Missoula about putting together some kind of a program around it. But it's a flawed film, but it was really entertaining and had a happy ending. So.
So I think actually though, Susie, well, thanks first of all for mentioning that this is coming, but I think it's also a real opportunity for us to talk about the role of libraries in this situation. But I read a really interesting article in Public Libraries, and I want to read the book called Palaces for the People. That's about infrastructure, and especially public infrastructure, that brings people from all walks of life together, and how critical that is for increasing understanding and compassion and resilience. And this was actually a very inspiring article because he really talked about, he focused on public libraries because they're usually easier for everybody to use, but I think he meant libraries in general and how they are places that bring people together from all walks of life and how that's absolutely critical for our society. And it is an opportunity for us, but I think you're right, Susie, in that we need to acknowledge that there are people who don't want to have that experience and who are afraid when they see someone who doesn't look like them. And how do we overcome that and make it safe for them and not make them feel degraded? Because I think sometimes that happens. They know that they're maybe not supposed to feel that way, but they do. And so then they kind of react defensively instead of being open to the possibility that they can learn something or that it will be okay, that is in fact safe. So I think that would be a very interesting conversation for us to have in libraries about how to do that. I'm not sure how, but go ahead, Amelia.
No, just so something else I read, and this was just a headline, so I didn't actually read the article, so I don't know how accurate it is. But there's a program, I think it was started in Florida, called Build to Zero, that's actually been successful in eradicating homelessness in a handful of cities across America. And it started with this one town. I think it was about 120,000 people, and they all were just like, this is getting to be too much. We need to actually do something about it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure how the program is set up or what exactly that they do, but it's been successfully modeled and replicated in other cities, and I think has had some pretty good success. And so it tackles general homelessness, and then it also tackles veteran homelessness. And it sounds like all the places they've done it have been on the smaller side. So it's not like Miami or Chicago or anything on that scale. But that's on my list of things to look at because
it's called Build to Zero?
Build to Zero or Built to Zero. Actually, probably Build to Zero makes more sense. Because, yeah, I think places aren't Chicago or Miami and could be successful.
Like in Bozeman with the MSU School of Architecture, they have, I think they're seeking potentially another grant for tiny house builds, and they're piloting. My understanding is that they're piloting, basically communities of tiny houses that would provide housing to homeless or other people who would qualify. So it sounds something maybe similar to that program, but that's already happening here in Montana.
I saw that they did that in Seattle. Mm-hmm. People allowed tiny houses for people on their property. It's pretty good here. Something to put there.
Yeah.
It's a really cool concept.
Yeah. I wonder too with the film, if that there would be, I mean, it's probably too late for this year, but an opportunity at MLA to have a screening and kind of public forum discussion that gets to some of the questions and concerns that you're confronting.
Can I, not to put our...
I could speak to that. I made a strong attempt to try to connect up with the distributors of the movie to see if we could coordinate something at MLA. I thought it was a great opportunity. I wasn't successful, and it's actually coming out a few days after MLA. That's the official distribution date.
Oh, okay. But so you know how my experience changed.
So can I ask some of our small to medium libraries, is homelessness an issue for you?
It is in Boulder and in the surrounding area because we have had so much job loss lately, and we have one low-income housing place and the rest, because the others over by Carly on the Clancy, Montana City side, they're building massive houses. So I don't know if they can afford them in my opinion, but they're building them anyway, but a lot of people can't afford them. When I bought our house in Boulder, we got it for $75,000. You can't get a house, a modular house, a tiny little modular house in Boulder for under $157,000, and families cannot afford that. So our county is looking into trying to partner with somebody from the state to try and get low-income housing in Boulder. So I do know homelessness is a big problem in Jefferson County.
So Sonia says, yes, and transportation. What about you, Stacy? Are you in a place where do you see any homelessness in your area? Since she's traveling well. Oh, yes, that's a really good point, Eva. Homelessness this isn't just a public library issue, it's also tribal libraries should be included. And I don't know that it's even just tribal libraries. I think I've heard that some of the school libraries know they have students who are experiencing homelessness as well. Is it an issue for our special libraries, or you don't?
Yeah.
I would say you'd see it.
Yeah. Not all the time, but often.
Yes.
So
If you're homeless, you're under a lot of stress. Yeah. You can see how that would be a mental health component. Okay.
and I felt really good.
If any of you have some thoughts on how we could maybe do this, I would really be interested in knowing. And maybe this is an idea to keep alive when we talk about the money part. Maybe there's some resources we could put towards this. Because I think this is an issue that crosses all over Montana, maybe crosses all types of libraries and all sizes.
Actually, a couple of weeks ago on Montana Public Radio, they have a children's program called Pea Green Boat. And as part of that program, they read from an audiobook, or from maybe it's just the reading from the book. But they did a whole week on homelessness and children experiencing homelessness. And they brought in somebody from I think a homeless shelter in Missoula to talk about what it's like for kids, who are either temporarily or, just kind of in a transient situation. And they read the book Crenshaw by Catherine Applegate. And I'm like, you know what? A really wonderful novel about a family that loses their home and they have to live out of their minivan, and that's a great way to build empathy and understanding on a level that children can understand. So I just thought in terms of this, you were talking about Boulder, I thought, well, that would be totally something that would be maybe that kind of experience where it disrupted their school experience. And I thought that was a really great way to bring that to a different audience, and then you could somehow tie that to library programming.
It's called Pea Green Boat.
Yeah. It's cute. It's a great show.
So trivia, what's the name of the librarian who retired from Missoula County Public Libraries?
Yeah.
the host
And actually, you have a lot more to cover.
for years and years and years.
Oh. I don't know if Elizabeth heard the question.
I'll leave that to her to answer.
I did miss the question.
There's a trivia question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Chloe.
Which Missoula librarian was the host of Pea Green Boat for so many years on MTPR?
Retired librarian?
Yeah.
Well, was it? I didn't. Well, Marcia used to be the host, but I don't know if she was a retired librarian or not. Right now, we have Pam Carlton and Dana McMurray both here at least every 2 weeks.
I want to come back over Fridays.
Former Chinese librarian. Oh, I can't think of her name. I could see her.
Yeah, it runs through my tongue.
No, it was before. She was really amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So we'll think of it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we'll think of it. So there's been some good chat, so I just kind of want to share it with the group because I know it's hard to read. So Eva says that frightening numbers of adults and children fall into the classification of homeless. Jennifer says small communities do have homelessness, but we also have issues with people living in homes that do not have basic utilities, heat, water, or electricity. Pamela says in academia, it's called food insecurity and home insecurity. And Jennifer mentioned that, keep hearing conversations from Dana. So I think they're just talking about someone whose call is, they're hearing other sounds. Sonia earlier mentioned something about intergenerational programming at Miles City Public Library, which I think is of interest to others. And I just wondered, Sonia, if you wanted to share a little bit more about those programs. I'm sure she's typing, which is kind of hard to do. Scrolling through. All right. Well, I'll check back and see if she has something typed later on and can share about that. Oh, here we go. So she says, we try to include all ages and involve the schools with programs here at the library. And I think that's something that's actually pretty powerful. And I know when Amelia and I went to the Lifelong Learning Symposium, that was really cool, some of the intergenerational ideas that people had. There's been some really interesting studies about how, with teenagers, we stick them in a high school with their same age. But if you look at history, they used to spend a lot of time with all kinds of ages, and they were healthier as a result of that. They had more support and a different perspective. So I think that's a very positive, powerful thing libraries can do with intergenerational programming. So if anyone has any examples that maybe we could try out and share with other libraries, let Amelia know.
Yes, please.
All right. Well, thanks for this good discussion. I really appreciate it. And I think it kind of sets us up really nicely for the next topic. And that is the Fair Library Access Resolution. So I'm just going to close out of this here. I'll open this up, knowing that it's probably very hard to read. All right, so this came out of what actually started when I brought that Montana library card idea to the NAC. It really inspired, I think, Bruce and Jenny to start thinking about a statewide strategy for library services. I think really maybe like the next step. Like, okay, we sort of have the shared catalog. We sort of have these collaborative efforts. What's next? What can we do that maybe crosses the walls of different types of libraries and our geography and so forth? And as a result of that, this resolution came out of some of those conversations, and Bruce shared it with the commissioners at their February meeting. And he shared it for a couple of reasons. I think first that the state library's mission statement kind of changed a couple years ago to just helping communities thrive, whatever that community looks like. You know, whether we're thinking of public libraries in towns, whether we're thinking of school communities, whether we're thinking of the people we serve in special libraries and how we build community. And it also came out of sort of feeling like we were making some assumptions that people valued collaboration, kind of like Susie and Kara talked about, but maybe on a real life day-to-day basis, some of the behavior didn't seem to value collaboration, meaning that there were sometimes behaviors that were protecting one library over another or just building mistrust, not communicating well with each other, which I think could somewhat be a reflection of the tough times we're in, just as a society as a whole. It just seems like it's hard for us to talk to each other like we once could. And so they wanted to sort of inspire a conversation about just making sure, are we taking a wrong turn by emphasizing collaboration? Karen and I jokingly said that if you told us we would have an existential crisis at the state library, but we'll get through it. If we're on the wrong path, we're on the wrong path. We need a new path. And so we wanted to start with you. You are my guinea pigs. I have not had this conversation with anyone else. The commission talked briefly about it in February, but I wanted to talk about it with this group because you represent all of Montana and all of the different libraries and all the different sizes of libraries. And I wanted to know what you thought of this resolution. Right now, it's pretty like inspiring and highfalutin. So this conversation is somewhat like bringing us maybe more to the middle, to talking about the values, to talking about what this would look like, to setting us up to maybe create some statewide strategies. Maybe it's not one strategy, maybe it's multiple strategies. That's going to provide services for Montanans that are services sufficient for their needs. Not maybe what we would define, but what they would define as they need to be successful and to thrive. And so I kind of started us off with some questions in that memo, just to have you, get the juices flowing, see what concerns you had, see what questions it brought up for you. I can't say that I might be able to answer them here, but I can at least file them away for the commission to talk about. They're very interested in hearing what you think. So I'll go ahead and pull up a document to sort of start taking notes. And I'll just sort of open it up with the first question here, which is what questions does this resolution bring up for you? Sonia says progress on statewide library cards. Is that just a question that you're asking about this resolution? Sonia, or? Okay. Do you need me to make that bigger for those of you who are online?
Or in the room, too.
Or in the room?
Thank you.
All right. What other questions? So I'm just gonna, yeah.
I have deep concerns about the political viability of some of the wording.
Okay.
The concept of that group members who have the most share resources with those who have less that would be
Okay.
deeply problematic for many of the political people. Whether or not I agree philosophically, I think that this would be a hard sell, and my community does not tax itself and does not provide resources, and I don't know that it's fair to then turn around and say, hi Helena, you guys have a lot of money, you should share with me. So
That's a great point. Yeah, it's interesting because historically our cost-sharing models for databases or, well, I don't want to confuse the different cost-sharing models that we've had in the past, but essentially that's what the case has been. Those with the pots of gold have kind of footed a larger share of bills with that altruistic and really great idea of, by being able to support this, more people can access and take advantage. And so
but I'm pro that.
Yeah.
I'm just,
but it's been a
the
sticking point.
The political landscape is, the word socialism is being thrown around a lot in the news right now, and so just the wording kind of strikes me as quite polarizing.
That's a very good point. And Dana says, school libraries are being assigned content teaching duties and supervisory duties for digital learning. This has squeezed our ability to collaborate with teachers on our staffs, let alone outside our physical walls. So I think, Dana, the way I would word that concerns is the demands on teacher librarians' time is actually keeping them from being able to collaborate. And I actually have a question. Is it just school librarians or teacher librarians, or is it all of our librarians?
I think it's all of our librarians.
Okay.
The more we do, like when I started in Boulder, we didn't have any programming except for story hours and reading. Now we do programming at least once a day, every single day, and people want more and more and more, and I'm like, wait, I'm one. You're many. You want all of this? You come in, do it. And actually that has had some success, not all, but it does, at least for the small mediums, because the more we give, the more they want.
Although on the flip side of that, a lot of collaboration does save time.
That's a
You
good point.
can join the Montana Library to Go, and if you're not on the selection committee, all that content's picked for you. And
Exactly, I like that part.
It happens, and with the shared catalog, there's a lot of stuff that's taken off your plate, so you can focus on other things.
So Sonia said, sometimes I wonder if the discussion needs to be on the word public, because we seem to be public, but not for everyone or every community. I'm not totally sure what you mean, Sonia. Do you mean like public, use public instead of community, or do you mean public library instead of all types of libraries, or do you mean something else? So I listed that as a positive, that sometimes collaboration can save you time.
Yeah.
Are there other
like
cost sharing? Who has what? Okay. So let's see. Maybe I'll just this additional thoughts.
Could you read Sonia's comment on public again?
Can I read it? Yeah, absolutely. She says, sometimes I wonder if the discussion needs to be on the word public, Because we seem to be public, but not for everyone or every community.
I think that was a question that kind of came up for me when they're introducing the idea of the Montana Library Card. That what are the boundaries? What is the definition of a public library? Are there exceptions?
Okay. So for you, the question is, what does public mean? Kind of? What are we meaning when we say public library?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Cody.
So I had two kind of things that immediately jumped out to me. So the first is just this notion of right, or this right that Montanans have. And I'm only thinking about it in terms of, like, I totally agree that, we all have this kind of inviolable right to seek out ideas and have access to ideas and content, these kinds of things. But I'm thinking about that in terms of like the practical notion of that right is in fact curtailed quite often for people due to behavior in libraries or due to like financial situations. Like we do actually curtail these rights in certain situations, and like I don't know if that amounts to, like in this resolution talking a little bit about like the good faith of the library patron or something like that. Because surely like, initially they have this right, but is it always going to be guaranteed? Because I would think like no, like there may be situations when that right is in fact no longer apparent. Anyway, so I don't know, just thinking about that. Like at what point, if ever, maybe they don't, but at what point would someone be unable to access these kinds of services or something like that? And that's kind of all I had about that one. I don't know. Just because I know, like, for me here at Billings, like, I do get really uncomfortable with the fact that someone can be, like, permanently trespassed from the library. Like, I think that is uncomfortable because I don't want them to lose access to these services. But we may have very good reasons for doing so, namely, like public safety or threatening behavior, stuff like that. So anyway, I don't know if that fits in here, but that's what jumped out first. And the second one, as related to the really fair access, the equitable notion of all this stuff. In the actual resolution, so kind of that ending part, the second line kind of says Montanans have unique critical need for convenient access to sustainably funded, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought that word convenient is critical because a lot of this kind of reads as if what we really want to do is have a library building and have these services available, and then any Montanan can walk in and have access to it, which is certainly true. But that is not taking into account the deep practical concerns many people have, namely of getting to the library, of using these services. So like this notion of access, I think, needs to be a little bit more than this passive idea of having things available and like if people don't use them, then that's just their choice, because sometimes they don't use them and it's not their choice. So that idea of conveniency, I thought, was really crucial, that it's more a question of how do we not only have access to these things, but provide them in that convenient, easy to access kind of way for people.
That's a really good point, Cody.
And just to play the devil's advocate, like, if you choose to live up in Monarch and you're very far away from the Great Falls Public Library and the bookmobile can't maneuver in the snow, we can really try for that, but it's more expensive to provide services to people who are geographically isolated, and so where are we going to put our resources to make sure that we serve everyone and everyone has access, but can we, it's just tricky. That was not very good.
think I got it though. We need to recognize that it's more difficult and can be more expensive to provide library services in more geographically remote areas.
Yes.
Okay. So the question that leads to me, is return on investment.
Right.
Okay.
And I have some questions. I'm sorry, go ahead and finish that.
Thank you.
So let's say this declaration, becomes official. What authority does it hold? I mean, it's referencing the Montana Constitution. Is this going to go in the regulations or, okay, so it's just like a charter, a mission statement kind of.
Yep.
Okay.
I think Bruce envisions it, or the commission, and the commission too, because they liked it, as like giving particularly state library staff like a mandate, and going forward creation of a strategy to address these issues. Does that help?
It does, yeah, but I mean, a mandate still is sort of a strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering,
Mm-hmm.
would there be something that can be challenged? I mean, so inmate populations, that's a question that comes up. And kind of what Corey was saying, that there are some populations that, due to different circumstances, that right is going to be restricted. And would this then give kind of if someone were trying to challenge this, I mean, maybe it doesn't, that's, I guess, what my question is, what authority does it hold? I mean, a mandate is kind of a strong word. If you're like, well, employee or staff is essentially ordered to do this, is that an internal policy? Is that a, and then, I don't know.
Let's see.
Just like,
What authority will this have, maybe since there are some populations that, we can't necessarily serve, or we may be unable to serve?
yeah, that won't have the same right.
Or, as Cody said, due to actions they've taken, they're receiving limited services. Okay. Okay. You just check here on the chat, make sure I didn't miss anything. Is anyone, we haven't heard from those of you who are online, other than Cody and a little bit Sonia. Does anyone else have anything they want to add to the discussion about questions it brings up or concerns?
Well, this is Elizabeth. I'll respond to the fears about the political aspects of, the way in which socialist tendencies have turned into a, kind of a dirty word. I think that a good response is to wrap ourselves in patriotic enthusiasm. The idea of library services is a foundational and fundamental American institution and concept, and it's one of our core values as Americans. So you can emphasize. I think you can emphasize just the kind of the value of the library as something which, a core to our very identity as a nation. There's nothing more American than a library. So.
Thoughts? Questions?
I like that.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just saying on that kind of idea of the Americanism. I mean, my first kind of go-to conceptual thought of libraries is more democracy than like pure America. And ideally, those two ideas would go together.
Susie, did you?
I like it. Thinking about like, is it a mandate or is it more like a vision statement of like, this is how we want to move forward? And I think it's an, you know, we're talking about some of the stumbling blocks, but I think it's an excellent vision of this is really what we want to bring ourselves to, and it's what we're focused on growing toward while we recognize that there are barriers and
Limitations.
Yeah.
I think Bruce would be totally okay with that.
Yeah. And Jenny too. And Dana said democratic is how I think of libraries and taxes. Did you? Is that you, Cody?
Yeah, I was going to add, going back to the, like, what are we going to add to this, or what would we want? I mean, I think we would want to talk a little bit, or maybe in the actual resolution part, have a specific thing about like recognizing the limitations. Because I mean, like the example of the person who lives out in the country and the bookmobile can't get to. I mean, like, that's a very real scenario in Montana, and we do need to recognize the practicality of these things, right? So maybe it would be nice in this part, and I'm looking at the first part of the resolution, acknowledges there's an uneven distribution of library services, etc. I mean, it's good to recognize also that, I mean, the way this reads really is that we want to create a system applicable to every single Montanan, which, you know, is just going to be impractical. So just like a piece in there about recognizing that our resources or our ability to do this is going to be limited. So it is like going back to that question of return on investment, like doing the most efficient way of providing convenient access to people. I don't know. I think that would be a more persuasive part of it, to recognize that yes, we know that we're not going to hit all the people in Montana that we like, but we're going to try our best.
Nor can we recognize what all of the needs are.
Right.
So we can't even say what the needs of all of our citizens are. So there's a real disconnect between understanding what those are and even having a plan to fill those needs. I have more of a general question, no big deal, but you know, one of the things that we're very focused on and sensitive to is our constitutional obligation around Indian education for all. And so while we say all Montanans, I think there's an opportunity potentially to specifically talk about how our libraries and the services and resources that they provide help us to fulfill that recognition of both historical and contemporary Native life and the needs of those communities as well. It's in the Constitution, Part 10, Section 1, Romanet 2. And it's not just tribal community members, it's that obligation to educate Montanans about the distinct and unique cultural heritage.
Is that better? Or not quite capturing what you're...
No, I think that's close to what the language is in the Constitution.
Okay.
The other part of it goes on to, and this is about educational goals, but this talks about the legislature providing such other educational institutions, public libraries, and education programs it deems desirable in support of educating about the unique cultural and historical heritage of Montana.
Okay. All right. So you brought up something, Colette, that I kind of mentioned in the memo that generated actually a fair amount of discussion amongst the commission, and that is, what does sufficient unto the patron's needs mean? And, you know, I do believe Bruce was certainly thinking that it means the patron gets to define what's adequate or good library service or what they need. And so that kind of leads to the sort of questions I had. What do we think that would look like?
And is that really achievable, given our finite resources?
Well, and need is such a difficult word because I want to push back a little bit on that because I feel like a lot of what we do is we improve quality of life. And, you know, is it necessary that I have audiobooks to listen to while I do my housework? No, that is not a need, but it improves my quality of life. And that is important. Yeah, I get what they're trying to say there, but I could also see people say, those kids don't need to play video games. You know, nobody needs to Facebook, but so
Yeah. I don't know, some people would say yes.
it makes my life measurably better.
Yes.
And I think about this question in terms of, again, something framed in education, which is universal design, or which in a nutshell is how do we remove any physical or intellectual barriers to the information experience that a student needs in order to learn and grow. And so that forces you to look at what are those intellectual barriers that a student might have, and what do we have, whether it's physical resources or services more generally. How do we take away those barriers? And so that's, you know, it's the things that we're doing. I mean, the Talking Book Library is an incredible example of a program that removes physical barriers to a citizen, for a citizen to access whatever information they need. So I don't know, that's kind of a half-baked thought at the moment, but I'm with you, like that word need, we talk about needs assessments and that, but we can't ever quite connect the dot between what we have and what any given patron might need, and we really can't determine that need or judge what that need is based on, you know, that individual. So
I think Eva has a really good point, and it follows up with what Susie said. Need is so subjective. For example, we might feel like a patron needs access to fast broadband services, but to someone living out of their car, their need is probably much more simple, and how could we help with that?
And I agree, Dana, it's not up to us to determine the patron's needs.
Oh, thank you for catching that one, yes. I will add that, Dina. So just to, I guess, push back a little bit, and mainly I'm speaking for Bruce because he couldn't join us today. But don't feel bad for him. I believe he's skiing in Austria or some fancy place. I think what he was trying to capture and couldn't figure out how best to word it is the idea that while, it's up to the patron really to determine their need, there's a recognition that as librarians we need to know what people want or need and provide services that are relevant rather than the old-fashioned, well, you should read this book because it's good for you, and I don't really care if you're not interested in that topic kind of thing. I think that's what he was trying to capture, so I just wanted to defend him a little bit. He just couldn't figure out a way to word that.
No, it's tricky.
Yeah.
It has to be a balance between constantly reacting and being able to build some kind of strategy that is within our capacity. Like Cody mentioned the limitations. That's a huge question for me about this document is I'm not really sure how this is any different from what we are actually doing in practice because this is aligned with our core values as librarians. We try to provide access to resources. So if I'm reading this document as perhaps a strategic attempt to document that this is what we're trying to do, but we don't have the capacity to do it, so therefore we need more funding and staff to achieve this goal. Is that the intent of this? Yeah.
Oh, those of you who are online cannot see me. That was Kara talking, and she was asking the question about is the goal of this document to be able to maybe get more resources, funding, and staff to try and achieve this vision? And I can say confidently, yes, I believe that is the goal.
I think another potential outcome is taking a look at the current public library standards in administrative rule, and do those ideas, which last time they were changed was almost 20 years ago now. A little bit less maybe, but do we need to take a look at our standards for public library service, and then begin to realign whether it's resources or plans of service, that sort of thing, to
I think that's
take a more modern look.
Yeah, because that's why my question is like, what is the authority? Is this going to be in rule or what? Because that
is very
the
much
statement reminds me of what's already in the rules, and so maybe that would be a more, if you really wanted to have some teeth. But I was saying, as Kara was saying, this is already pretty obvious of what libraries are doing, but maybe it's a look at the rules to see if those need some updating. Because again, I don't really understand. I mean, and I know Bruce isn't here, but I don't quite. This is what is there like an end goal? Is this is this like, okay, we're going to pass this now, we have to do this statewide card? Is that or something? I'm not sure.
And I don't know if go ahead.
Sorry.
Nope.
This is Pamela. I echo that. I'm sitting back and listening to everything, and it's an interesting discussion, but I was just trying to bottom line it and go, what are we trying to really accomplish here? And if this is, in fact, a way of summarizing what we're about or what we believe in, or is it a marketing tool, or is it a bit of both? If it is a marketing tool, then I would harken back to what Elizabeth said. I think, at least in the current climate, you can't go wrong with wrapping yourself in the American flag. And another point would be public libraries have a great advantage, this is my perspective, over academics, in that, I mean, you can always underscore the fact that you're the people's university. And that was the tagline, in fact, for like Cleveland Public Library. And that's I think with the lifelong learning emphasis, which I'm actually just going to talk about a little bit in my presentation. I'm just seeing it come in a big, big way now that people aren't taking the traditional route of K-12 and then college and then work. It's a mishmash, and public libraries could have a really fundamental role to play in that.
So Pamela, to kind of follow up on that, is it that you're thinking this resolution should only apply to public libraries? Or is that your question?
Yeah, I guess it was a half-baked thought, obviously. I guess I'm just trying to figure out what are we trying to really accomplish with this? That's my bottom line. Who are we talking to? Why are we doing it? I don't know. Maybe somebody else could speak to that.
No, those are very good questions. And I do believe that the purpose of this is somewhat to give us something that we can share with funders and policymakers to explain what libraries do. I think that's part of it. I think part of it is a feeling of a need to come back as a collective whole in Montana and ask ourselves, do we still share these values? Is this document overall, at its heart with its concept, a fair representation of what we are trying to achieve in Montana, or is it way off base? I think that's part of that too. I think it's also designed maybe to inspire conversations about a statewide strategy for libraries moving into the future. And I don't know that it's the Montana Library Card, but this idea that if you're a Montanan, you have access to libraries, and maybe even that whole concept of libraries working together to create a seamless experience for patrons from when they're at birth, they're at public library, and then they go to school, and then they go to college, and then maybe they go to the hospital and they need the hospital library and that sort of thing. I think that is also what was in the back of Bruce and Jenny's mind as we were creating it.
Okay. And what if they go to jail?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't. I mean, other people. I don't know enough about this, and hopefully you guys can inform me. But I mean, I'm just very curious as to what kind of library support access inmates are getting in the state. But that's derailing the conversation. But maybe somebody else can tell me that offline later.
I can connect you, Pamela, with Wendy Zuber, one of the prison librarians.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a note to do that so I don't forget.
And I can tell you that we have quite an active inmate correspondence, and we updated our policy. We don't do interlibrary loan, we don't loan books, but we, with Wendy and Marissa at MSP, our updated strategy is we do one free request up to 15 pages by regular mail a month, but if we can do it by email and then they handle the printing on their end, we can provide a lot more. So that is what we're working with now. But
cool. Well, it's just a topic that is interesting to me. But
yeah.
Anyway, didn't mean to get off.
No, it's very interesting, and those are good people to connect with. And if if you're interested, they came and visited the law library, and we actually went and got to see their libraries up at MSP, and it was very useful.
Mm-hmm. We actually do interlibrary loan with the prison, but it's set up that it has to go through Wendy before it comes to Madison. Yeah. So the Toole County Library in Shelby provides services for the private prison population at Crossroads.
Yeah, and our policy was to all incarcerated, not just MSP, but there are most frequent requesters.
That does make sense that that be a population you'd specialize in.
Yeah. We're doing our children's librarian, fantastic, and she has actually reached out to the JDC, the Juvenile Detention Center in Great Falls, and we're going to do some summer reading programming.
Oh,
with
nice.
The Juvenile
right.
Detention Center. Is that already? Yeah, okay.
That's cool.
So hopefully, I mean, we're on track to do it. They have some severe limitations, but we're really wanting to do that.
Mhm. So this is sort of a tricky issue, but I'm gonna go ahead and ask it. And it's actually a hard question for me to ask. There's sort of the people who pay the bills, and there's the people who are unable to pay the bills. And in libraries, I think we're always walking that line of providing services to both. And I think a big challenge we face is how to balance that, because I think we sort of instinctively know that, honestly, the people in the juvenile detention center, I would use the word need, or the homeless population need us, right? Or the prison inmates need us, and we can make a pretty substantial difference in their lives. But we are facing the fact that our funding comes from people who maybe don't need us. And I don't have an answer for that, but I'm curious, is that a challenge? Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. It's one I sense, and I don't know the best answer to, but it is.
Yeah, I can jump in for a second here too. So, by the way, it takes like 30 seconds for me to unmute myself for some reason. So,
Cody.
yeah. So I also work with the JDC here in Billings. So we're actually doing the Great Stories Club from ALA, but we do bi-weekly sessions with them and do some work with books and stuff. And we, as a library, have been trying to do a little bit more. I know some of our librarians have done programs at the women's prison. Our director just went out and is doing some stuff. I know the local halfway house is doing some programs on their own here at the library. So for us, it's been a lot more like doing these active programs as opposed to offering services. Although I'm trying to brainstorm ways of like what's a consistent service we can offer. In my case, incarcerated youth. But no, like I've thought a lot about this idea of potential pushback of using city tax dollars essentially to benefit incarcerated youth, because I think that would be an argument that would come up very easily in the community. But it kind of comes down to, on the one hand, the way libraries are perceived and why they exist at all, and then also like what are they actually meant to be doing. So, I mean, a lot of people in the community do think that libraries are something that are meant to be fun, or just repositories of books and these kinds of things. They don't really see the value of a library as an actual institution to enrich a community. And I think part of that idea, like this idea that libraries don't just passively exist, they're actively trying to improve people's lives, as that resolution kind of points to, that this may be a key part of it. I mean, because we see that people don't seem to mind often about spending money on the judicial system and these kinds of things, but again, look at the justice system. Is it meant to just punish people, or is it meant to actually improve these people and, by implication, improve society at large? So no, I mean, I think it is a question of like, what do we see a library's work in the community? What is it meant to be doing? And if you can kind of pitch it in those terms, you can talk about these kinds of ideas a little bit easier. So, you know, why are we working with incarcerated youth? Well, it's because on the one hand, as has been said, that they're the people who need it, but also because that I would argue is like a core function of a library.
Thank you, Cody. It's a good argument to use. So Dana, what do you mean by branding your libraries much like public television?
Actually,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it might be faster if I just talked. So I was just thinking about, I was watching TBS NewsHour last night, and they were doing their, bi-yearly call for donations, and I was thinking that we've had a lot of talk about the bill payers and the non-bill payers and who do we serve and walking the fine lines, and I just wonder if talking more about the public part of libraries would help get the message across that we have facilities, programming, and items to serve all segments of the population. And that it's free for all, and I don't know. I would like to see maybe like, I struggle. I struggle. I think I love the Imagine If programming, but living in Whitefish, I honestly do not physically enter their library hardly ever. And even our public library in Whitefish, the programming is a little more old-fashioned, but consistent and well advertised, and I partake more of the digital content than I do of the physical content. But I don't mind making library services available for the people who can't pay the bills. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does. And I think, I've taken a fair number of classes now from every library, and honestly, that's their experience. It's not really whether or not you have a library card. It's just there's a certain percentage of the population that believes in libraries and that they are valuable. Mm-hmm. And as of right now, it's still a majority, and they're still willing to vote yes. But things have shifted in a negative way over the 10 years between kind of two different studies about that concept. Mm-hmm. And I think that is sort of something that we are up against.
Well, and I know that school librarians are starting right now to really struggle with advocacy within our buildings, with our administration and with our colleagues. Students, no problem. They still get it. And the more enriching the programming at the school library level, the more the kids are willing to come in and partake of all segments. I don't even know if you can hear, but I have a big group of fifth graders in here right now. But our colleagues and our administrators see us as an empty space during class time. And it bothers all of them if I don't have 30 bodies in the library every single bell scheduled period. They wonder what in the hell I'm doing with my time. And so I'm trying to figure out ways to show what my work looks like when the times are slow during the day. And so I'm kind of coming at it more from the library is a democratic area. I have books for non-readers. I have books for nonverbal. I have books for students at a 1300 Lexile level. And I'm trying to point to how I provide services for all segments of the population. But defending my job within the school structure is making it very difficult for me to collaborate with anybody outside the school. And I'm sad that that's the case, because I used to walk over to the public library and coordinate with them a little bit more about getting students into their library as well.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point, Dana. And I think you led us into a conversation about challenges that are keeping us from being able to implement this vision. And just, hearing you talk and looking around the room, I think there's some wording changes we'd all kind of think would be better and stronger.
But my sense is we don't have a problem with the underlying value that people have a right to have access to information, and that we should, be patron or community centered, and that we should work together where we can. But we've kind of hinted that there are challenges that keep us from achieving this vision. And
Yeah.
Dana, you just listed one. You're having to advocate with your own administration, and I suspect you are not alone in the teacher librarian world.
No.
But we also know we have the challenges of a lack of time. And I actually being victims of our own success. Is that a fair thing to say, or is that okay?
No, I think that's fair. I just try to sometimes take the comments that people are sharing and try to figure out how the school library can connect into it as well.
Which is wonderful, Dana.
What makes me think about with this conversation is, how do we communicate how successful we are, and carving out the time to communicate about how successful or responsive we are. And I think back over the years too, and including the latest campaign, Montana Libraries, Information Powers Growth, when we've had assistance with communicating in a very powerful, very public, very accessible way, we see upticks in, people walking through the door. We see more general interest in supporting libraries and that sort of thing. So I wonder if part of whether this ultimately points towards changing some of the public library standards, or some of the services that are provided through the state library, is to continue to communicate success, to have that support, so that it's not one individual having to make their case and advocate for their own library or their own program, but it's the community helping support that burden. But I know that without regularly and powerfully communicating who you are and the success that you have, why it makes a difference that there's this program for this library in your community, then it's always going to be an uphill and continuing battle. But that's, I think, where we could really leverage the collaboration and expertise of state level programs to help at that local level.
And maybe something that goes along with that. I think Sue and I talked about project outcome, but I've been thinking a lot more about using project outcome with some of the things that I'm doing, and I am planning on using it with the summer reading kits that we're sending out, and I'm hoping that people will be able to use that data in order to better convey what they're doing, how, like, the good stuff, like how many people, and like the things that people understand directly. But then, measuring impacts and the outcomes of, like, what did the program do for the people who attended. And in general, I'm planning on sharing out all of this information to all the libraries so that people can see. I hope it's going to be like a bandwagon effect kind of thing, where themselves can just see, like, what they're doing, and then also communicate that to people coming, and then seeing where that goes from there. So that's just something I'm
making that so accessible. Like, I'll never forget your testimony in the legislature 2 years ago. Like, those are moments that, makes me emotional now. So it needs to be somebody's job to capture and share those moments, because it's not just data, it's you talking about.
Well, and I'm going to throw this idea out there. I wonder if, in order to fulfill the lifelong learning goal, I wonder if it's time for school libraries to fall under the state library umbrella rather than the OPI education umbrella.
Can I have collate?
And it would. I wonder if our community school combo libraries would have some thoughts on how that might work.
Libraries. first step that takes a change of statute.
Yes.
So you got 2 years to work on that campaign.
I enjoy the big boldness of the idea, though.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about, and Dana and I obviously have talked about this in the past too, and so that's all I can say about it right now.
I'm going to let Stephanie speak. She's.
Well, I just kind of want to circle back to the lack of time. One of the things that I have been really thinking about a lot is it's also just, I am worried about librarian salaries and librarian compensation. Because when we look at big things like this, part of me is like, oh, we can do more and we can stretch and we can, and yet, so when we get more money from our funder, we always say, oh, we're going to do more, we're going to reach more, and I think we also need to say, well, you know what, we got a bump, we're not expanding hours, we're not expanding programming, I'm going to pay my people a little bit closer to what they deserve. And that's not very politically palatable, but when the city advertises for a meter reader at a higher wage than reference desk staff, when we're looking for, we have to upping salaries even without expanding what we do, I think is a necessary thing.
I think that's a huge challenge, and I don't remember the last time that there was a compensation study done in Montana for public libraries. I think this is very much like the conversation about teacher compensation and the challenges with recruitment and retention in communities that can't meet the pay scales of other larger communities in that.
But I think
and for teachers, it's because we don't have a statewide system. That's community by community, board of trustees by board of trustees, and local taxpayers. But information like compensation study might be kind of some data that would help make the case.
But I'd actually even say I don't want compensation study comparing librarians to librarians because we're all underpaid. I want compensation to managers in public works to managers in the library. Like, let's look at true equity, not,
Library director for the Boulder Library, I was making 20 cents an hour more than the library aide that I was supervising because we're part of a union, so there's a step thing. She's been there.
Well, retirement, less work.
Easy, the way the system is working right now.
That's a good point, Susie.
Good job to help me.
I'm looking at the time. It's 11:57. So I thought we would break at noon and have a little lunch and maybe process kind of what we're thinking about here in this discussion. Before we break at noon, is there any more feedback from those of you who are on? Because I know Cody and Dana.
This is Pamela again. I want to just jump back for a second to the question about school libraries falling under state library. I would say that you could make also a strong argument that they should in fact be more tightly connected with higher education since it's all part of the direct pipeline and there are some similarities. I think there are definite pathways and collaboration opportunities there.
So like should they fall under academic libraries, Pamela, or just be connected?
Well, this is something Coley could address better than I can. I mean, I doubt that OPI is ever going to just go, great, so long, I don't think they're going to let it go. But I just think, maybe if as it would be reflected as how it's being governed. But yeah, I think it makes, in some ways, it's more logical to keep the education libraries within the same. Yeah, I'm getting lost here. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but it just seems more logical to me because you get them in that pipeline and they're learning whatever, they're getting used to using e-resources and whatever, then you can route them on to higher education more readily.
Okay. I added that to the document.
Thank you.
Any other final thoughts? Okay. Let's go ahead and take a half-hour break for lunch, and I will go ahead and mute us for those of you who are online, so you don't have to hear us eating our lunch. And then we'll reconvene at 12:30 and kind of wrap up this conversation and then move into our next agenda items. Thank you for a really great discussion so far.